everyone, and welcome back to Rowing with the Homies. I'm Finlos, and I'm really thankful you decided to tune in today. There's a lot going on, a lot on my mind, and I'm happy to be able to talk about it with you. I've been thinking a lot about the idea of truth and how our experience of it feels less and less stable. It's a fundamental concept, at least we should think so. We expect to know what's true and what's not, but it feels like the line around truth, around fact, is getting blurrier every day. And so I'm going to spend some time going into some specific examples of how I'm seeing this play out. And then we'll spend some time exploring why it might be happening and what it could mean. And then finally, we'll drill down into how the effects of all of this might impact us and our mental states. And so what's on my mind is the feeling that our understanding of what's true is becoming increasingly flexible or even fluid. It's not really a philosophical concept anymore. It's not as simple as defining what is true versus what is false. It's something that's playing out in real time. We see it in the news, and we especially see it in our social media feeds. And there's a lot of examples of this, but something that I find interesting is how people with whom we put a lot of cultural cachet try to wield that in ways to bend the truth. And a perfect example of this is the really messy situation with Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with these people, they are very popular actors. Blake Lively rose to fame as the star of the show Gossip Girl and has had a successful career in film, becoming known for her glamorous, fashionable, and down-to-earth persona. Justin Baldoni is a popular actor and director who is mostly known, or best known, for his role in the TV series Jane the Virgin, and for directing and starring in movies like 5 Feet Apart. He has also been praised and elevated for his public persona, often promoting an image of vulnerability, positivity, and a deep commitment to men's mental health and feminism. And this is where the story gets really complicated. The two of them starred in and produced a film together based on the popular book It Ends With Us. But just before the movie even came out, a legal battle erupted. Lively filed a lawsuit against Baldoni and his production company, Wayfarer Studios, alleging sexual harassment and a hostile work environment on the set. But she also alleged that after she brought up her concerns, Baldoni's team orchestrated a public smear campaign to damage her reputation. This campaign, according to her lawsuit, involved using paid public relations teams to spread negative stories about her and planting misinformation online. This wasn't just a simple disagreement. It was a deliberate, multi-pronged effort to manipulate public opinion. Baldoni, in turn, filed his own lawsuits against Lively, her husband, Ryan Reynolds, and even the New York Times, claiming defamation and that Lively was the one creating a toxic environment and trying to take over creative control of the film. So why is this relevant to our conversation? Because fame and influence give these individuals a huge platform and a built-in level of trust with their audiences. When we see a celebrity who we've liked for years, we tend to believe them. We've invested time and attention in their careers and lives, so we feel like we know them. Their public persona becomes a stand-in for the truth of who they are. So when Baldoni, who has built his reputation on being a good guy and an ally to women, is accused of sexual harassment and a coordinated smear campaign, it creates dissonance, a huge disconnect. For those who trust his public image, the accusations feel impossible to believe. And on the flip side, when Blake Lively, who is also widely loved, makes these accusations, her own public image can be used to either bolster or undermine her claims. The legal battle has become a battle for public perception, with both sides using their fame and influence to try and win the court of public opinion. Something very similar played out in the messy and very public trial between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, where social media became a battleground for public sympathy, with edited clips and hashtags dominating the conversation and creating a powerful and often misleading narrative that felt completely separate from the courtroom proceedings. And then you have someone like Donald Trump. He has been relentlessly accused of spreading disinformation, inconsistencies, and outright lies. And it's not just accusations. There is documented, verifiable evidence of the untruths, of the misinformation, of the lies that he says. So it's not even a question of whether or not he is being factual. What makes his situation so different, though, is the sheer volume and frequency of his statements. He repeats them so often that for many, they start to replace the actual truth. He's created a version of reality for his supporters that is separate from traditional facts. It's not just a one-off lie. It's a sustained, ongoing effort to create an alternative reality where his words and his version of events are the only truth that matters. And a massive part of his strategy is his now famous catchphrase, fake news. It's a term that has changed public discourse. He doesn't just disagree with news outlets. He frames them as dishonest, as biased, as the enemy of the people. Before this, while people might have had their own opinions about media bias, there was a general societal understanding that news organizations, for the most part, were working to report facts. By labeling any story he disagrees with as fake news, he creates a shortcut to dismiss information without having to engage with it. It gives his supporters a simple and powerful tool to discredit any source that challenges his narrative. It doesn't just erode trust in specific outlets, it actively undermines the very concept of a shared, verifiable reality. And this is where it all gets exhausting. For those of us trying to stay informed, to actually understand what's happening in the world, the amount of effort required to discern the truth feels overwhelming. I hear a story and then I have to wonder, is this an accurate report? Is this a paid-for narrative? Is this a lie repeated so many times it's starting to sound true? I'm constantly having to check sources, cross-reference stories, and filter through the noise. It feels like a full-time job just to be a reasonably informed person, and that work can be incredibly draining. The mental labor of sifting through all of this becomes its own kind of weight. And that weight, that constant effort to find a firm foothold in the truth, really gets me thinking that this constant effort to understand the truth isn't just a byproduct of our current moment. It's a necessary form of active participation. And it's a huge shift from how we used to get our information. For a long time, the traditional news media, mainstream media, as it's derisively called, outlets like CBS, ABC, and the New York Times were the primary sources of information. For all their flaws, because they have flaws, the general public largely trusted them to provide a consistent version of the news. The stories you heard reported each night were generally consistent with what you read in the newspaper. This created a shared reality that, for better or worse, most people agreed upon. And it made it much easier to have a conversation, even when there was disagreement, because at least we were starting from the same set of facts. This is why politicians like Donald Trump work so hard to paint these traditional news outlets as untrustworthy and fake news. By discrediting the traditional sources of a shared reality, he creates a vacuum that he can fill with his own version of events. It makes people stop seeking out information from those sources, and instead, they rely on his pronouncements or those from outlets that are aligned with him. It's a masterful and deeply dangerous strategy to control the narrative. And to complicate things, you have social media, which has completely changed information. On the one hand, it is a positive thing. It gives a voice to people and perspectives that were traditionally excluded from the mainstream media. It allows us to hear directly from individuals, to see events in real time, and to find communities that share our interests. It has the potential to be a powerful tool for good, for amplifying marginalized voices and holding powerful people accountable. But on the other hand, social media has created an information free-for-all. Anyone can post anything, and with a few clicks, that information can be shared with millions of people, regardless of whether it's true or not. There are no editors, no fact checkers, and no shared standards of truth. And this has led to the proliferation of echo chambers, where we are only exposed to information that confirms our existing beliefs. And what started as a way to get news from new places has become a weapon for disinformation. The algorithms are designed to keep us engaged, not to keep us informed. They show us what we want to see, which makes it even harder to seek out and engage with diverse perspectives. This creates a world where each of us can have our own version of the truth, completely disconnected from the person sitting right next to us. And this is where it's also really important to talk about the rise of influencers, both paid and unpaid. Influencers are not just celebrities. They're people who have built a platform and a community around a specific niche or personality. Many of us follow them because we feel a genuine connection and trust their recommendations, which makes them powerful figures in commerce. However, this close relationship with their audience can also be a double-edged sword. Paid influencers, for example, are compensated by brands to promote products. The Federal Trade Commission requires them to disclose these relationships, but often the disclosure is subtle or non-existent, leaving followers to believe the recommendation is a genuine, organic opinion. The blurring of these lines is where the relationship with truth gets murky. For the influencer, their role is to generate sales for the brand, but for their followers, they are often seen as a trusted friend offering advice. We can see this playing out in a massive way with the detox tea trend. Influencers, some with millions of followers, and others with smaller, more dedicated communities, would post highly edited images of themselves looking slim and healthy, often holding a product with claims of a detox or cleanse. These posts were often a form of paid advertisement, but the disclosures were either buried in hashtags or completely absent. The influencers would talk about how they used the tea to get ready for a vacation or jumpstart a new healthy routine, positioning it as a harmless and effective part of a healthy lifestyle. This created an incredibly effective feedback loop. Followers saw someone they admired and trusted using a product, believed the product was the secret to the influencer's appearance, and then bought the product themselves. The reality, however, was that these teas often contained powerful laxatives and diuretics, like senna leaf, that caused temporary water loss, not fat loss. They also came with serious health risks like dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, and long-term digestive damage. The truth of the matter that these products were ineffective at best and harmful at worst was completely overshadowed by the curated image of a beautiful, trusted person using it. For millions of people, the influencer's sponsored post became the truth, regardless of the science or the health risks. Another example of a paid influencer campaign that blurs these lines is a recent revelation from the Israeli government. Recent reports have uncovered a program where the Israeli government is funding tours of Israel for a group of young, conservative, MAGA-affiliated influencers. The goal of these trips is to foster a pro-Israel stance among this group and their followers, ultimately shifting public opinion and securing more support for the country's policies, including the ongoing occupation and destruction of Gaza. This campaign is a calculated, strategic effort to influence a key demographic that may have previously been more skeptical. It's a perfect illustration, a dangerous illustration, of how governments and powerful entities are using the trusted relationship between an influencer and their audience to disseminate their own narrative and bypass traditional media. The followers of these influencers may not realize that the content they're consuming is part of a sponsored political campaign. The work of truth has never been more difficult. It requires us to actively seek out different perspectives, to check the sources of our information, and to be willing to admit we might be wrong. It's not just about reading the news anymore. It's about being an active and diligent participant in the creation of our own informed reality. And this constant active mental effort is directly tied to the feeling that's been weighing on me. And today, depression feels like, relating it to our conversation about truth and disinformation, today depression feels like a state of perpetual exhaustion. It's not just the physical tiredness, though that's certainly a part of it. It's an emotional and mental weariness that comes from the constant effort of trying to make sense of the world. There are so many sources of information, so many ways to be deceived. And it's not just big, grand deceptions, but also the small, everyday ones. The carefully curated Instagram feeds, the paid-for endorsements, the subtle manipulations. It makes the world feel fundamentally unreliable. When I'm in a depressive state, my mind is already working on overdrive, often on negative thought patterns or anxieties. And adding this layer of information noise on top of that feels like trying to run a marathon without being able to see. The result is a deep sense of unreliability. If the news I read might be fake, if the people I see on social media are manufacturing their reality, and if a politician can simply declare an alternative truth, then what can I trust? This can make the world feel like a shifting, unreliable landscape. There isn't a stable place from which to stand or to move. And for me, this feeling of unreliability can get so intense that I start to doubt my own experiences. Did that conversation really happen that way? Was I right to feel that emotion? Am I misremembering something? When the external world feels so unreliable, it's easy for the internal world to start to mirror, to also start to feel unreliable. The constant questioning of what's true in the world can blend into the constant questioning of what's true about myself. So today, depression feels like a heavy blanket of exhaustion. The weariness of a mind that's constantly on guard, constantly trying to discern what's real and what's not, both out there in the world and inside my own head. It's the exhaustion of trying to find solid ground when the earth beneath me feels like it's constantly shifting. And sometimes it's hard to find the energy to even try. That was a lot, but that's it for this episode. And I really appreciate you sitting with me through it. If any of this resonated with you, I want you to know you're not alone. It's a shared experience to feel overwhelmed by the information, by the noise, to feel the weight of it all. If you're feeling this, please consider reaching out to someone you trust, a friend, a family member, or a professional. If you have comments or questions, or maybe suggestions for future episodes, reach out to me on social media, or send a message to finlos@finloslives.com. If you found anything of value in this, I hope you'll consider sharing it with somebody in your network. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform so you can be informed of any future updates. Thank you for being here with me today. It's good to know that we're in this together. I look forward to our next conversation.